Hi, this is Mahavan Das. Welcome to Simple Gita, Chapter 16. This chapter is entitled Divine and Demoniac Natures. Let's take a look at the connection between it and the previous chapter. In Chapter 15, Krishna compared this material world to an upside-down banyan tree, but the results of activities on the tree's branches were not described. In Chapter 16, therefore, Krishna explains those results as the development of various personal qualities which lead to higher or lower qualities of life and either facilitate or impede the quest for enlightenment. Quick overview of Chapter 16. Krishna describes the qualities of both the spiritually progressive and the materialistic person, and explains in detail the mentality and activities of the materialist which stem from his qualities. He concludes by showing how the materialist, due to lack of adherence to higher authority, ultimately causes suffering for himself and others in this life and the next. He therefore recommends one develop the divine qualities by learning how to engineer one's lifestyle according to the recommendations of higher authorities in order to gradually attain enlightenment. Let's check out the first verse and purport here from Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is actually 3 verses. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Partha, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature." Srila Prabhupada gives a lengthy purport to these verses here at the beginning of chapter 16, so we'll just read the first paragraph. In the beginning of the 15th chapter, the banyan tree of this material world was explained. The extra roots coming out of it were compared to the activities of the living entities, some auspicious, some inauspicious. In the 9th chapter also the devas, or godly, and the asuras, the ungodly, or demons, were explained. Now, according to Vedic rites, activities in the mode of goodness are considered auspicious for progress on the path of liberation, and such activities are known as Daivi Prakriti, transcendental by nature. Those who are situated in the transcendental nature make progress on the path of liberation. For those who are acting in the modes of passion and ignorance, on the other hand, there is no possibility of liberation. Either they will have to remain in this material world as human beings, or they will descend among the species of animals or even lower life forms. In this 16th chapter, the Lord explains both the transcendental nature and its attendant qualities, and the demoniac nature and its qualities. He also explains the advantages and disadvantages of these qualities. Let's look at the key points here for this chapter. So we've heard here in texts 1 to 3 about the divine qualities, and these lead to enlightenment and liberation or freedom from the cycle of repeated birth and death. The divine qualities are in the mode of goodness, and those who are situated in that mode are considered divine because they cultivate those qualities and follow higher authority, while the demoniac reject that and are therefore controlled by passion and ignorance, and develop corresponding qualities. So the mode of goodness, because of the cultivation of these divine qualities, is conducive to enlightenment, while the modes of passion and ignorance are conducive to bondage. And we'll hear more about why that is in this chapter. So that's really all that Krishna says here about the divine qualities. He gives this list and explains that these are transcendental qualities and they belong to godly men endowed with divine nature. But he does give much more detail about the demoniac qualities. So in the next section of the chapter, he explains that these demoniac qualities lead to ignorance and bondage. You may wonder what that term means, demoniac. Does it mean someone who runs around with a little pitchfork with horns on their head and a tail? No, it just simply means a materialistic person, someone who possesses the qualities of a materialist. And we will hear what those qualities are in this verse number 4. Krishna says pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demoniac nature, O son of Pritha. So this is what makes one a materialist, or a aspiring transcendentalist, someone who's spiritually progressive. The possession of various qualities which come from the modes of material nature. The divine qualities come from the mode of goodness. The demoniac or materialistic qualities come from the modes of passion and ignorance. So, in this purport to this fourth text, Srila Prabhupada explains in this verse, the royal road to hell is described. The demoniac want to make a show of religion and advancement in spiritual science, although they do not follow the principles. They are always arrogant or proud in possessing some type of education or so much wealth. They desire to be worshipped by others and demand respectability, although they do not command respect. Over trifles, they become very angry and speak harshly, not gently. They do not know what should be done and what should not be done. They do everything whimsically, according to their own desire, and they do not recognize any authority. These demoniac qualities are taken on by them from the beginning of their bodies in the wombs of their mothers, and as they grow, they manifest all these inauspicious qualities. So we'll see then that this tendency of the materialistic person to not recognize any authority, this is a point that's made again and again. And because of that disrespect for authority, therefore the demoniac qualities manifest. So while we don't see an abundance of the divine qualities in society today, we do unfortunately see a lot of these demoniac qualities, which are often propounded as great qualities. To be proud of oneself, to be arrogant, to express one's anger, to be harsh in one's dealings, to be ignorant. There's the saying, ignorance is bliss. Of course, that's not the whole saying. The whole saying is, it's folly to be wise, where ignorance is bliss. So, in society today, in general, we can say that the divine qualities are severely lacking, while the demoniac or materialistic qualities are in abundance and are often propounded as great qualities. They're often exalted. Krishna explains, those who are demoniac do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness, nor proper behavior, nor truth is found in them. Why is it that the demoniac do not know what to do? It's because they don't follow any standard spiritual authority. They rely on their own sense perception and experience to make decisions. Of course, our sense perception is severely limited, and our experience is also extraordinarily limited, and we also have a tendency to forget our experiences and what they may have taught us. So this is the problem with the materialistic conception. Not following any standard authorities and relying on one's own imperfect senses and very limited experience to make decisions about what should be done and what should not be done. Also, because they don't follow standard authorities, they are not clean, truthful, or properly behaved, which are, of course, all essential characteristics for anyone wanting to make genuine spiritual advancement. And as Srila Prabhupada explained in his purport to text 4, this is not limited simply to people who are just claim to be materialists. As he said in his purport, the demoniac want to make a show of religion and advancement in spiritual science, although they do not follow the principles. So that tendency to want to make a show of being a religious person or a spiritual person, but to not actually follow standard authorities and legitimate principles, this is a demoniac mentality, a demoniac tendency. Krishna goes on to say, they say that this world is unreal, with no foundation, no God in control. They say it is produced of sex desire and has no cause other than lust. So this is the materialistic philosophy. Everybody's lifestyle, everybody's society is based on some particular philosophy. And while we may not consider ourselves particularly philosophical, our lifestyle is also based on some kind of philosophy, no matter how rudimentary or simple that philosophy is. So the materialistic philosophy, which unfortunately is the basis for, generally speaking, you could say all of contemporary society, is that there is no such thing as a spiritual reality or component or supreme being. Only matter exists, and everything comes about through material causes only. There are no higher causes. Ultimately, everything just happens by chance. So the natural conclusion of this philosophy, that there is no ultimate authority in the cosmos, there's no spiritual reality, is that the materialist thinks that they can just make their own rules. They can decide what's best for them, what's best for others. And we hear in the next verse the results of that. Krishna says, following such conclusions, the demoniac, who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence, engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. So this is the end result of the materialistic philosophy explained in the previous verse. And Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport to this verse, he gives some examples of these unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. And we may not consider these particularly horrible or meant to destroy the world, but that's actually the case. Srila Prabhupada says, animal killing is very prominent amongst demoniac people. Such people are considered the enemies of the world, because ultimately they will invent or create something which will bring destruction to all. Indirectly, this verse anticipates the invention of nuclear weapons, of which the whole world is today very proud. At any moment, war may take place, and these atomic weapons may create havoc. Such things are created solely for the destruction of the world, and this is indicated here. Due to godlessness, such weapons are invented in human society. They are not meant for the peace and prosperity of the world. So, one result of demoniac philosophy, materialistic philosophy, and the lifestyle that comes from it, that we may not connect as being a result of those things, is climate change. Climate change is a result of materialistic philosophy and the activities that come from it, such as the whole petroleum industry, drilling the ground for oil, resource wars, pollution of the environment, industrialization in general, and animal killing. Animal killing is responsible for over half of the carbon emissions in the world, which are responsible for the global warming, etc. So that's just one contemporary example of so many that we could give. This is why Krishna describes the materialist as having no intelligence, because they can't see that their activities lead to their own destruction. Recently, scholars have identified that human beings are the only species to destroy their own habitat. So, that's not a particularly intelligent position to take or to be in, to destroy one's own habitat. And climate change and global warming is a result of that. Srila Prabhupada comments, the demoniac are engaged in activities that will lead the world to destruction. The Lord states here that they are less intelligent. The materialists, who have no conception of God, think that they are advancing, but according to Bhagavad Gita, they are unintelligent and devoid of all sense. They try to enjoy this material world to the utmost limit, and therefore always engage in inventing something for sense gratification. Such materialistic inventions are considered to be advancement of human civilization, but the result is that people grow more and more violent and more cruel. Cruel to animals and cruel to other human beings. So you can definitely see that if you study history, even in the last few hundred years, that since industrialization, with the invention of more and more materialistic gadgets and weaponry, industrialization, etc., for the purpose of sense gratification or material enjoyment, the result is that people have just grown more and more violent and more cruel to each other and also to other living beings. So these are the actual practical results of a materialistic philosophy and lifestyle. In the next section, we get a description of the activities of the materialist and their consequences. So more details here as the chapter goes on. First of all, we hear about their tendencies and conduct. Krishna says, taking shelter of insatiable lust and absorbed in the conceit of pride and false prestige, the demoniac, thus illusioned, are always sworn to unclean work, attracted by the impermanent. So this term unclean work, the Sanskrit is asuchivrata, specifically refers to 4 activities that block spiritual progress, and they even block material progress as well in a lot of ways. These activities are meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. And each one of these 4 activities directly attacks the 4 principles of spiritual advancement, which are truthfulness, cleanliness, austerity, and mercy. So these activities, they contaminate the consciousness or they cause bodily identification so strongly that spiritual advancement is basically impossible. So we hear also in this section about the attitude of the materialist. Temporary pleasures of the senses are life's ultimate goal for a human being. And therefore the materialist will take on one anxiety after another to achieve that goal of temporary gratification, which is actually never achieved. You can never gratify the senses enough. They're never satisfied. And actually, the Bhagavad Gita will demonstrate that there is nothing particularly human about simply arranging temporary pleasures for the senses. All species of life do that. And the other species of life do that without so much anxiety and work that the human beings take on. Also in the graduate study to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the spiritual encyclopedia, it's explained there that the pleasure that animals and humans derive from the basic activities of sense gratification, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending themselves, it's basically the same. It's the same level of pleasure. It's not that because we have a human body with human senses, we enjoy these things more than any other species of life, or actually any form of material enjoyment. It's the same taste, actually, the same experience. We hear in this section about the engagement of the materialistic person, that they secure money by illegal means for those purposes of arranging temporary pleasures for the senses, which they consider to be life's ultimate goal. So without money, how are you going to enjoy your senses? And so the philosophy is just get money this way or that way, however you do it, even by illegal means, and enjoy yourself. So we see in the world today there's so much corruption, bribery, and securing money by illegal means. Then we get a description of the thoughts of the materialistic person. Krishna explains that the materialistic person thinks, I have so much wealth now and I'll get more according to my schemes. I've killed those who oppose me, and anyone else who does so, I'll also finish them off. I'm the enjoyer. I'm perfect. I'm powerful. I'm happy. I'm surrounded by my friends and family who all appreciate me, all appreciate how great I am. All my fans, however you want to extend that. I'll sacrifice and give some charity and be happy in that way. So the materialistic person will even perform sacrifice. They'll even give charity. But it's all for selfish purposes, which are ultimately meant for self-destruction and destruction of the world. So what is the destination of such people? Krishna explains that actually they enter into hellish bodies and environments in the next life. That means animal births. Why? Because they don't want to accept the great responsibility of human life. That human life entails the responsibility for becoming self-realized, for becoming enlightened. They want to act just like any other species does, without any responsibility, just trying to enjoy the senses. So nature, directed by the supersoul, gives them what they want, gives them that facility in the next life. It's as if nature says, okay, you don't want to be a human being and accept the responsibility of human life, well, fine. You can take an animal birth and be happy in that way. So this is, of course, a great tragedy from the perspective of an enlightened person, because such people have missed the extremely rare opportunity of a human birth, that opportunity for self-realization, simply for the same pleasures that are freely available in any other species of life. Only the human form of life gives one the facility for self-realization, for enlightenment, and for genuine happiness. So you miss that opportunity, and you could be waiting millions of births till you come back through the various animal species to the human form of life and get another opportunity. So this is considered a great tragedy by those who are enlightened. The final section of the chapter, we get a description from Krishna about how to give up these materialistic tendencies if we have them. He says there are 3 gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. And he says every sane person should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. So they lead to the soul taking birth in animal species. He says the man who has escaped these 3 gates of hell, O son of Kunti, performs acts conducive to self-realization and thus gradually attains the supreme destination. So how does one give up these 3 materialistic tendencies, lust, anger, and greed, which lead to degradation? He explains it's by just following standard spiritual authorities. Therefore, one knows what should be done, what shouldn't be done, what should be feared, what shouldn't be feared, what's binding and what's liberating. And so if one doesn't do that, if one chooses to ignore the standard spiritual authorities and just act according to his own whims, then he doesn't attain the supreme destination, meaning the spiritual world. He doesn't attain perfection, which means in this sense an understanding that one is not one's body, but spiritual, spirit, soul. And the person doesn't even attain ordinary happiness, ordinary material happiness. So you don't get happiness, you don't get perfection, and you certainly don't get the supreme destination by ignoring the standard spiritual authorities, such as the Bhagavad Gita. But by following authorized yoga wisdom texts like the Bhagavad Gita, we can develop the divine qualities and make genuine progress towards these things: happiness, perfection, and the supreme destination. And Srila Prabhupada explains why that is. Why is it that if you follow these authorized yoga wisdom texts, you make progress? He says that Shastra, that's the Sanskrit word for yoga wisdom texts, is without the 4 principal defects that are visible in the conditioned soul: imperfect senses, the propensity for cheating, certainty of committing mistakes, and certainty of being illusioned. So we all have these disqualifications. We all have imperfect senses, the propensity for cheating. We all commit mistakes, and we're all illusioned. The primary symptom of that, of being illusioned, is that we think we are our body. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say, these 4 principal defects in conditioned life disqualify one from putting forth rules and regulations. Because you can imagine a whole lot of people getting together with these particular defects and trying to come up with a progressive path forward. Obviously, it's not going to be particularly successful. It'll be hit and miss at best, and there'll be a lot of misses. And that's what we see in the world today, a lot of misses and not many hits at all. As Krishna said, if you ignore the standard spiritual authority, you don't even get ordinary happiness, what to speak of anything beyond that. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say, therefore the rules and regulations as described in the Shastra, being above these defects, are accepted without adulteration by all great saints, acharyas, and great souls. In other words, those who are switched on, those who are actually clued up, they understand that Shastra, or this authorized yoga wisdom, is perfect knowledge. And if you follow that perfect knowledge, you will get a perfect result. So that's an amazing opportunity, isn't it? That we can actually learn how to, by studying authorized yoga wisdom, basically get a perfect result from everything that we do. Because we actually know what is to be done and what is not to be done in all circumstances. Let's summarize. In this chapter, we've heard Krishna explain the various results attainable by those on the branches of the upside-down banyan tree of the material world. Those who follow standard authorities act in the mode of goodness, are happy, and are gradually elevated to self-realization. Conversely, those who don't are controlled by passion and ignorance, so the modes of passion and ignorance, which we heard about in the 14th chapter, the 3 modes of material nature, and are therefore in constant anxiety and degrade themselves and others both in this life and the next. Krishna therefore advises that we give up attachment to these modes of passion and ignorance by following standard yoga texts like the Bhagavad Gita. In the final text of this chapter, he says, "One should therefore understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that he may gradually be elevated." Srila Prabhupada says in his purport, "In human society, aversion to the principles of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all fall-downs. That is the greatest offense of human life. Therefore, Maya, the material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always giving us trouble in the shape of the threefold miseries. This material energy is constituted of the 3 modes of material nature. One has to raise himself at least to the mode of goodness before the path to understanding the Supreme Lord can be opened. Without raising oneself to the standard of the mode of goodness, one remains in ignorance and passion, which are the cause of demoniac life. Those in the modes of passion and ignorance deride the scriptures, deride the holy man, and deride the proper understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They disobey the instructions of the spiritual master, and they do not care for the regulations of the scriptures. In spite of hearing the glories of devotional service, they are not attracted. Thus they manufacture their own way of elevation. These are some of the defects of human society which lead to the demoniac status of life. If, however, one is able to be guided by a proper and bona fide spiritual master who can lead one to the path of elevation to the higher stage, then one's life becomes successful." Let's have a short preview of Chapter 17. Chapter 17 is called The Visions of Faith. In Chapter 16, Krishna has established that faithful followers of authorized yoga wisdom texts are divine, and they make progress towards self-realization, while those who are faithless towards such knowledge are materialistic and are degraded, achieving neither happiness nor perfection either in this life or the next. In other words, Krishna explained 2 extremes: those who have faith in legitimate authorities and those who don't. In Chapter 17, Arjuna asks Krishna about a middle category of people, those who have faith in something supreme, but not in authorized yoga texts. In response, Krishna explains faith and its manifestations according to the 3 modes of material nature. Thank you so much for joining me in the class today on the 16th chapter, Divine and Demoniac Natures. And I look forward to seeing you in the next class, Chapter 17, The Visions of Faith.